don't kill that spirit inside of yourself that wants to keep building and wants to keep creating. And like, that is the most important thing. Like, don't let that pilot light go out.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Tara Viswanathan with me today. She is the CEO of Rupa Health. And she actually was recommended for me to get to know by one of my favorite VCs in the world, Eric. And he basically was like, Tara is one of the most amazing, interesting, fascinating people in the world, and you should get to know her. So I was like, well, okay, obviously I need to go do that. So we've had a chance to chat a little bit, and now have the pleasure to get a lot more of your time, which is one of the most precious things we all have, is our time on this podcast. So Tara, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Eric knows many people. So the fact that he said that is a huge compliment. And just so you know, I think the same of him, and anyone he introduces me to, I know is good people by association. So that means you.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I agree. Eric does know a lot of folks. I'm never quite sure how often he says that about everybody, because Eric is such a nice person. So I don't know what the filter level is there, but I agree. Like, I generally trust him, because he's pretty much spot on with every single person he's ever introduced me to. But maybe to kick it off, like, you've had a pretty interesting journey as a founder, including the past, like, 6.5 years or so with Rupa. Walk me through, just give everyone like a landscape of like where you are today. You've been at it for 6.5 years, yet you're now ranked as one of these fastest growing Series A companies that everyone should go get to know. But it's been 6.5 years, which I think in VC land is a really long time to get to that sort of point. So where are you as a company? Like, where are you as a company, team wise, size wise, whatever revenue numbers you're okay, get just to set the stage with folks?
Yeah. I think the first thing is that when we say 6.5 years, like, what I found in startup land is that most people chop their start date off way after they actually really started. And so when I say 6.5 years, like, that is the bare bones. Like, that's when I quit my job without an idea and just total conviction in the space. No clue what I was going to do next. Like, that's how long that has been. We have been in market with this product for the last 4 years, or now 4.5 years, I think. And so I think that's the part where, to most people, we look like a 4.5-year-old company. But I think that's the first lesson, which is this journey is so much longer than most people make it out to be. I think in every, article, it looks like every company is this overnight success story, and that's just not the case ever. There's always, a decade in the making before it. And so where we are today, we raised our seed round in 2020. We raised our Series A in 2021. And we actually did an extension it was basically our insiders wanted to put more money in, and we did that in 2022. And we haven't needed to raise more money since then. And we're about, a little over 100 people. We don't share revenue numbers or customer numbers, but we serve thousands of, doctors' clinics all across the US. We serve hundreds of thousands of patients, and we do, millions of lab tests. And so it's in that range, and it's been a absolute wild ride to get to here.
Explain. So describe Rupa to everyone who
Yeah. So we make it simple for doctors to order advanced lab testing. Like, that's the simplest way to understand what we do. We are a marketplace where we bring together all the latest lab companies in one place. And then we create our platform lets doctors and healthcare providers order kind of personalized testing. So genetic testing, hormone testing, advanced like microbiome testing and things like that. And then on top of that, we have one of the largest educational platforms for what we call root cause medicine. So it's basically helping healthcare providers become the type of healthcare providers we all want. So people who see us as individuals, people who want to get the root cause and not just band-aid our symptoms. Like, people are really trying to understand what is going on in our bodies. People who want to prescribe not just medication, but maybe food, nutrition, exercise, things like that as well.
Why? So it's right. There's a kind of an interesting question too. Like, why have both of those kind of those sound like two different products? Arguably, like the root cause analysis, like marketing explanation, discussions around that, and kind of content, and lab tests for doctor, like enabling lab tests.
Yeah.
In one place. Like, why have both?
Honestly, it started because we were just giving the market kind of what they wanted, which is they wanted to learn about the testing. that was available. So what is the latest testing available? What can I use and how do I learn to use it? And so we started just with offering live classes. So a webinar every Wednesday, once a week a few years ago. And that has turned into a whole educational program because people just wanted more and more education. I think what ends up happening is if you're a healthcare practitioner, you go to school, you get your degree, and then you have what's called, continuing education credits that you continuously do year over year. But for most people, that's checking the box. That's not actually learning the interesting stuff they want to learn. And so we just created a platform where it's a lot of doctors teaching other doctors or healthcare providers teaching other healthcare providers. And so people have really been drawn to it. And I think there's also just no content like it out there. So it started from just let's teach everybody about the testing that is on our platform to now it is a much broader swath of education.
And what made you decide to get Rupa started in the first place? I mean, your background, from what I can see, wasn't exactly healthcare focused per se.
Yeah.
Sort of maybe quasi in that space a little bit, but not really. Why were you this problem needs to be solved, and I am the one to go do it? And I mean this in the nicest way. You have a relatively impressive but generic background before that's Warden. Okay, great. You can do good business school. You clearly were good at school. Why were you the one to go solve testing as a
yeah. I think, what's funny is I'm pretty sure 99% of my learning has come from building this company, not from any school that I've attended. So
generally, I came from those entrepreneurs.
Yeah, generally accurate for most people. This is a much longer story, which we can get into another time. But basically, I got sick. And I think that's how most people get into this is they start not feeling well and then realizing that the way the medical system is set up today might not be helpful for everybody's illnesses, specifically chronic illnesses or more complex illnesses. And when I'm just not feeling good, when my hormones are out of balance, the conventional system doesn't really know how to take care of me when I'm just feeling off, when I'm more chronically ill and it's not like I have a broken arm or it's not like I need surgery. And that happened to me in college. And so that just kickstarted this journey of me learning about my own health, which then ended up me doing a lot of stuff in this industry, which led to the discovery of what I believed probably over a decade ago now, maybe 15 years ago, was going to be the future of healthcare, which is a more comprehensive, personalized, holistic approach to health.
Has that actually come to fruition? What parts were your sort of the naive perspective that you might have had when you were starting the company actually became true in reality versus once you're we have so much further to go still?
It came true beyond my wildest dreams. There was a moment. Yeah. When I started Rupa and was raising our seed round, pre-seed round, sorry, at the end of 2018. Nobody understood what we were doing. I got laughed out of every room saying this isn't real medicine. Because what people thought about when they thought about healthcare then was just the hospital system and how do we make it more efficient. And what I was talking about was a whole new paradigm to human health. It was how do we get to the root cause? How do we have a more holistic approach? And holistic used to be such a negative word when you talk to people in the healthcare system. And I think that that's what it was. Then, 3 years later, and we're starting to see Huberman as the #1 podcast in the world, Peter Attia. You see all of these people with their books like Mark Hyman. It is just blown up in a really big way. And now still to this day, I have so many people come to me and say, you were the first person I heard this from. And I think that's the thing is to be on time, you have to be early when it comes to market timing. And it's really uncomfortable to be early. But that's what you have to be. You have to have total conviction in a space and go for it and recognize that most people aren't going to understand.
Do you think there are lessons to be learned? We probably both have lots of friends who were early, but they were too early.
Yeah.
Right. So what were your secrets are there any things that you're just getting lucky, just sticking around long enough for the world?
Yeah, I just got lucky.
What you were seeing?
I got lucky. I could have been way too early. And I actually recognized that when I started. I said, I might be early, but I don't want to miss it. And I'd rather be too early than miss it.
What were the conversations like? How did you explain this to BCs? How did you go about explaining this is a reality, this is what's going to happen? Sure. Are there some things that you think you did differently?
The earliest ones, I don't think people either, one, had a health issue that wasn't able to get resolved by the conventional system, or having a close friend or family member going through it. Either they've been through it personally, and if so, they absolutely got it immediately. And if not, they weren't ever going to get there academically. And so when I talk to people, I think people would say, who are the people you want to talk to from an investment standpoint? I said, I don't know, unless they show me their personal health history. Like, I don't know. I need to just go talk to people. And so until I talked to them, I wasn't sure, but it was very much a yes or no. There was no in between gray zone. It was very
so
much
basically, as much as investors like to pretend they're unemotional, they're going to make a decision based on like the data and what it shows and things like that. In the end, it sounds like what you're saying is actually, if they had a personal connection to this experience, they were far more likely to be willing to invest.
And I think that what that translates to is an understanding of the problem. So they understood that there was a gap in what people wanted out of their healthcare and what was available. And we had to fill that gap somehow. And it was a very grassroots, like people demanding movement. And the people who had health issues, unfortunately, they saw that earlier than the people who didn't. Basically, what's happened is it was really focused around people who were sick and couldn't get help. I mean, the classic story is I've had this issue for the last 3+ years. I've seen 10+ different doctors. I have no answers. Everybody's telling me there's nothing we can do. I finally found this one person who looked at it from a totally different perspective and they were able to help me. Like, that's a story that you hear over and over. Now, what we're seeing is the people who maybe don't have any health issues, they're starting to just call it longevity medicine, and they're starting to call it, functional personalized medicine, which is just how they think about keeping themselves healthy. And so now we've really hit mass market, right? Masterclass is doing classes on gut health, and it is absolutely part of the zeitgeist now.
What do you think? I mean, so one, I totally agree with part of the zeitgeist. I mean, like, I'm definitely in the longevity train very much. I literally had a blood draw this morning. So I'm like on that train in a big way. What would you describe as, if you think through like the ability to like ride a wave, you guys are riding that wave right now. What do you think the elements were that came together, right? This happens over and over again in an industry where everyone starts seeing something around the same time. Like, the best entrepreneurs are the ones who are just a little bit ahead of it, of course, like you are. But what do you think came together to make longevity? Was it like because everyone had to sit inside for COVID and they didn't have anything else to do but like think about how do I like try to stay healthy? Like, what was the catalyst to make this actually become real?
Yeah. So I think that all of these market shifts are so obvious in retrospect, but really the reason why this one was so hard for people to understand is there was no one macro shift. There was a bunch of tiny micro shifts that basically catapulted into, there was a tipping point into a movement. And so the micro shifts were, one, consumers being more interested in their health and wanting to spend their money out of pocket, premiums going up. So people are basically spending money out of pocket. It was more and more prevalence of chronic illness with no cure, no treatment available in the conventional system. Social media is probably the biggest driver, if there was one, which is people's ability to share their stories about how they're approaching their health and reaching a broader audience. So suddenly you have a mom in the Midwest who's posting about her, infertility issues and sharing how she handled them. And now she's broadcasting and getting hundreds of thousands of people following her. That just wasn't even possible, a decade ago. Or maybe now a decade ago, but it was just getting started then. That was a huge factor into the movement. And then we have more, science has just advanced, research is advanced, lab testing is advanced. Like, there's so much stuff that has advanced.
And for you guys as a platform, I mean, like, can individual go and get their own tests, or is it really all through a provider who then in the providers now are able to find lots of their tests they didn't even know about? Is that like the idea is like they can find all these tests they didn't know about necessarily previously?
Yep. So what we have now is patients going to their doctors and saying, hey, can you get me a microbiome test? Can you help me understand my hormones? Can you do this? Can I get a perimenopause test? And doctors are basically like, no, I can't help you with that. I don't know how. And so what our platform is designed to do is basically support practitioners in helping order tests, receive results, interpret those results for anything that they're aware of. And then we have courses and content and education for areas that they want to get up to speed on too.
Oh, dope. And then so when you think through like the biggest challenges that you guys face today when it comes to like just the business overall, is it like making sure more providers know you exist, getting them on the platform? Like, what is your biggest challenge if you look ahead for the next few years?
Building features fast enough. It's literally, we're hiring engineers, please, like, send them over. Yeah. We truly have just a mismatch of things that we need to build and how fast we can get it out the door.
So that leads to another great question, which is like, how do you organize the company and what have you done differently over the different periods, right? Like when you think through the earliest days, what were the key things you were focused on building and how has it changed over the past 6 years, really?
Yeah. I mean, year one, year two is finding product market fit. That's it. Nothing matters until you have product market fit. Literally nothing matters. Team doesn't matter. Like nothing matters.
What did you do to make sure you had product market fit? And how did you define even
Yeah.
each? How do you know you hit it? Because like lots of companies might have it, but they don't know for sure. Which
Yeah. I'd seen too many companies like get tons of funding and not hit product market fit and die. And I was like, that's not going to be my fate. I'd seen that story over and over and over again. And so I just laser focused on it. And that was it. I actually wrote an article about this for the first round review on how we iterated into hitting product market fit. That I think the big thing around it is that, and this is, I think, very difficult for a lot of us who are incredibly driven and very, very data driven as well. There is no point when you have product market, like there is no metric that you can track. All it is it's a gut feeling and it's a knowing. But when you have it, like you don't even need to question it. It's just obvious. I think the two most important metrics to track are repeat purchases or repeat behavior that's unincentivized. So people coming back to use your platform or product again and again and again when you are not basically paying them to do so. And then the second is organic referrals. So basically people telling their friends about it and word of mouth. Like that's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think those are two great ones. And so you feel like you have iterated over and over and over again in the early days until you hit that point and you're like, okay, boom, we've hit it.
Yeah.
And then what was the big change then? What did you do from like a hiring growth team perspective? Was that when you go raise your next series of funding? What was
Yep.
it?
We raised our seed round whenever we hit product market fit. And actually, I was very intentional to not try to raise a lot of money before product market fit because I think that can distract people. So quite frankly, like what happens is you raise money and let's say you have even one or two employees, they start then it starts becoming we have money. We should start paying for things. We should start buying lots of stuff versus how do we figure it out when we don't have money? And when you don't have money, it's so much easier to just operate and focus on the most important thing. And it's like, that's actually what I focused on. I was like, I don't want to have the problems of money before we have product market fit. And I'm very glad that we did that.
Yeah. What are there like lessons you learned or it's like, why did you think through it that way? Like, what did you learn from your previous history? Like, I know as an example, you worked at Juicero back in the day. And like, I like that for those who don't know, they built sort of the famous, like, we're going to make a smoothie for you and sell you a really expensive packet, but it basically was just like a simple machine that
Yes.
you didn't.
And truthfully, like, who knows if they had done it right or if they had, like, they had raised around $250 million, I want to say. By the time they hit their Series B, they were pre-product, like, they were pre-launch. And I remember just realizing that there was so much good they were capable of doing in the food supply chain world. Like, there was actually a lot of good that was possible there. But it was essentially squandered on having too much money, having too little focus, having, not being hungry and starving for success in a way. I mean, I think we came out of the Kleiner Perkins incubator with 40 people in an office in the Mission. And, you hear that story again and again and again. Hyper-funded startup goes out of business. They spent a ton of money. And it makes sense because it's literally more money, more problems.
It's so true. I have another company in mind that I was an early investor in. Seemed like they were crushing it. Also, had like Kleiner Perkins backed, and it just fell apart. Like they also raised way too much money really fast and totally lost the story. What do you think it is? Like where did Juicero's VCs go wrong or their founders go wrong when they let that happen, right? Because theoretically, the whole point of having like a good board and smart VCs is not just they give you cash. It's not the world is awash in cash. I mean, that sounds like very rich to say, get it, but like the world is awash in cash for good founders. Why did the board or the founders not be like, hey, we're going to pump the brakes a little bit? What did they miss, and why does it happen? As you said over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Where
I don't know. I wasn't close to it. I was an intern. I was in grad school. Like I was driving down from driving up from Palo Alto like 3 days a week and also doing full-time school. And so it was a crazy time. And I think it was a huge education for me. So I wasn't in those meetings. Yeah. But what I will say is that I do think that, and I've seen it with ourselves too. As soon as you have money, you suddenly cannot say, no, we can't do it that way. Go figure out another way to do it.
You mean because your team will push back, but we can afford it. Like, let's just go.
Or afford it. Yeah, exactly.
So how have you kept that discipline then? Or have you?
Yes, we have. In the early days, it's just like money and time trade-off. I think as you get later stage, it's actually like a process versus just get shit done trade-off. And that's the one that I think is very difficult as you scale, which is how much process versus, and how much of it is we're going to talk about this as a group and how much of it is top down. And like you have to kind of make these decisions for your company and what's right. And I think the best advice I got on this was somebody telling me, hey, Tara, like the most important thing is that you have a company that you can work in. And so build whatever works for you. And I just thought that was such good advice because, and I think like, let's say another leader came in, like they'd have to build it for them because at the end of the day, like you have to survive in your own company. And so for us, I think that means probably less process. Like I'm not a process person. I think in the world of process, like I'm more of a product person. I'm more of a get the answer right versus building the process around it. Like I think recruiting, this is like one of my spicy takes, but I think recruiting, most people think about it as a process, but I think about it as a product, and we need to find product market fit with recruiting. And to focus all of our effort, it's not about just a sales pipeline and getting as many people in the door. It's about how do you build an experience that attracts the exact person that you're trying to attract. And that's so much more important. And so I think as we scale, the temptation to both like use money to be lazy and also to use process instead of, to feel movement instead of getting things right and being efficient. Like that is just forces that you have to battle daily. And I think the advice I got that was really good on this is, hey, Tara, your job is not to set the tone on that once. It's to set the tone on that every single day. Everyone's going to be pushing back on this every single day, and you have to hold the line.
So what do you say, like using recruiting as a good example, like you have a head of recruiting or something at the company. What do you tell them on how do they build recruiting as a product? And when they hit PMF, like how do you define that? What is the product spec for that? How do you
I don't like interview. Totally. So we have a recruiter and I say, the only thing that matters is you're getting high quality candidates in the door. That's literally the only thing that matters. I don't care about the interview process. I don't care about anything that comes later. That is all an optimization once we have a great pipeline of great people. Yeah. And to get great people, what do we need to do? Do we need to build, do we need to get really creative with our outreach? Do we need to do guerrilla marketing? Do you want me to phone call? Like a lot of people, like, tell me what we need to do to get, we don't need 100 people. We only need 10 really exceptional people for a specific role, for let's say, right? We're not hiring hundreds and hundreds of people. We're hiring on the order of tens. And so until you can do that, don't do any of the process stuff.
So is the thesis then, is that same thing go through like all your other product areas, just like optimize for a single goal and it sounds like you're not someone who tend to get into the weeds of like the how. You're going to say, let's agree on a goal and go figure it out.
Yep. Optimize for getting the answer right, not for being efficient, if that makes sense. Like it's a concept of like the monkey and the pedestal. If you've heard of this,
yes.
Annie Duke talks about this, and I think it's a Google X thing, but basically it's, let's say you need your job is to get a monkey, I think reciting Shakespeare standing on a pedestal. What do you do first? Do you build the pedestal or do you train the monkey? And the answer is you train the monkey because like everybody knows how to build a pedestal. Building a pedestal doesn't help you. But if you can't train the monkey to recite Shakespeare, then nothing is going to work.
There's no point in pedestal.
There's no point in doing it. And so we actually use that language. And I tell people like, figure out the monkey first. That's what I mean by efficiency. And I think that is really antithetical to how a lot of people operate, which is let me go do the things I know how to do. And like, let me run a process and let me get everybody's input. And I'm like, no, go figure out the monkey. And for recruiting, the monkey is getting great candidates in the door.
Do you think the reason you have that perspective on things is once again, like that's your way of doing stuff? Or do you think a lot of other founders also, they just end up taking kind of the easier path? Like the easier path is like, I want to feel productive and I want to feel like I'm making progress. I'm going to do all these little things in between because it feels like that's what I should be doing as CEO because I'm busy or I'm founding the company and therefore I should do it.
This is the hardest thing because imagine you have a 2x2 and on one, on the horizontal axis is like effort and the other is outcome. And I think in say it's like high effort, low effort, high outcome, good outcome, bad outcome. I think what happens is that most people want to believe that they're putting in as much effort as possible, so that in the case that they get a bad outcome, the high effort bad outcome, they can at least feel good about who they are and what they did. And we have equated effort with time spent like in motion. And so I have a whole thing on active versus passive work.
Yeah.
And I think that like we focus like active work being in meetings, like actively working out, so like passive work meaning going on a walk and trying to, process all the inputs that you've had and try to make a good decision. At the end of the day, my job is to make good decisions. And if I'm back to back to back to back to back, I'm not going to make good decisions. And so I've had to start adding passive work time in, which is incredibly painful because to the outside world, it looks like I'm not doing anything. And then if we fail or if I make a bad decision and I wasn't in motion, but I was just imagine I'm like on a walk, right? I have this negative belief about myself because society has told me that work should look like being busy. And if I wasn't busy and in meetings, then who am I? And I deserve to fail. And anyway, it's a story that we tell ourselves. And so I think it's like, I don't think it's me versus other people. I think it's a bit of, we are told that our goal is to grind. And so if we grind and fail, that's more, I feel better about myself than if I quote unquote didn't grind and failed.
In how do founders get like the message that is right? So I totally agree with that thesis. And like I have my time block in my calendar every day for like focus time. Granted, a lot of the time it usually means like I'm in back to back, same as you. And finally, like today after our discussion, I will finally look at Slack and email for basically the first time all day. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, then next thing you know, at the end of the day, and then you have to go do it later. Like how do you recommend did you do this when you were younger? Do you recommend every founder does this? Like set aside time for that sort of passive time, and like how do you get okay with that?
Strongly. Yeah. Okay. So I think that I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but this is how I ended up doing it. Pre-product market fit, I worked 7 days a week. I worked every single day. I was just like grinding out experiments to figure out if something worked.
Was that just because you feel like the only thing you need to do pre-product market fit is you need to find product market fit, and you don't need the passive time. You just need to do experiment after experiment after experiment as fast as possible.
Yeah, and I need passive time too, but like I didn't. For some reason, that rhythm was fine. In pre-product market fit, and I think a little bit of that was like I wanted to feel like I gave it my all, and so I worked every day, 7 days a week. Now, post-product market fit, I don't do active work on Saturdays. So I basically like Saturdays, like Friday nights and Saturdays, I don't make any plans ever, like not even friend plans, 0 plans. Wow. And so it is my passive work day. So I wake up, I go to a coffee shop and I just read and I write for hours and hours and hours until I don't want to anymore. And that's it. I don't check Slack. I don't check email. I don't do, unless there's like something really crazy going on at work. But like generally speaking, for 90% of my Saturdays, I don't do any active work. I do only passive work. And I don't, maybe in the afternoon, I'll go see a friend or something like that. But that has kept me and my mental state so much better. That's why I haven't burnt out and why I don't think I'll burn out. And there's a bunch of that stuff that I do. And I think it's super important. I've always been a pretty reflective person. I've always been a writer and journaler, like it's just who I am. And I find it fun. So I don't recommend it for everyone. I really recommend like do what's fun for you. And that is fun for me. So I do that. But I do think there's something about creating a rhythm. And I know that no matter how intense my Sunday through Friday is, I have my Saturday to just wake up and not do anything.
How many other founders do you think that have sort of a similar, like not the same as yours, but like a rhythm that like, I'm pretty disciplined and I keep the same sort of rhythm every single day, and in every week, every month, it's essentially the same thing. Do you think that's something that a lot of the best founders also do?
10% of people. I think it's the number one thing people struggle with. When I chat with my founder friends and I tell them, and I've given a lot of people my weekly planning schedule and then also my just like general rhythms. I think it's super important to create rhythms in life. Sports has seasons. Like most everything has seasons. Politics has seasons. Like everything has seasons. Business is the one game where there are no playbooks, there are no rules, and you are on the clock every single second of your life. when you're in it. And so you have to create rhythms for yourself. You have to create on seasons and off seasons. You have to create these ups and downs. And so I have a series of rules and things that I do. And actually, every bit of our company also creates these for themselves. So I think it's super important, and it's important to reflect on your progress and feel like there's a passing of time. And so I actually, when I share the things that I do with my friends, they have told me that they haven't done anything like this before. And so I'd be shocked if a lot of people were doing it.
What were they all doing before that? Do you think they were just deep in and every single, just working every day nonstop?
Being reactive. Yeah. It is like the feeling of being a slave to your work is the hardest. Like, I mean, that is what burns people out. The feeling of not having any control over your time.
Yeah. In like, what was it that like brought you from like, we hit product market fit, but even then, like you could have stayed in that mindset. It's like, what was the switch that flipped where you're like, okay, I now can give myself passive time and I don't need to work. I can work 6 days a week instead of 7. Like what changed for you?
I mean, and we were pretty intense. Like we did product strategy meetings on Sundays, like the entire company for a while. Like we were pretty intense, but like it wasn't even a question. We just loved it. And what changed is post product market fit, you have something. Pre-product market fit, you don't have anything. Post-product market fit, you have something. You have metrics suddenly. You can start to track things. You can start to set goals. You can't set goals based on anything before pre-product. Your only goal pre-product market fit is to hit product market fit. And you have to structure your life and your success and work around time-based things in pre-product market fit. So, for example, we're going to run 3 experiments in the next 3 weeks or something like that. That's the only way you can set goals. And it has to be input-based goals, pre-product market fit. Post-product market fit, you can set outcome-based goals. You can set, we want to hit this many signups. We want to, because we know how many signups maybe we can get last week. Here's how many we can get this week. And so there's a bit more of a built-in rhythm. And at least for us, our business basically runs Monday through Friday because we're serving doctors' offices and they're open Monday through Friday. And so there's a bit of like, there's not going to be an emergency on a Saturday.
Yeah. So it gives you the time to kind of take a little bit of a break. Speaking of like kind of metrics and goals and all that other stuff, like how deep in the weeds are you today when it comes to like setting all of those goals, metrics? Like, are you in every product decision meeting? How are you done when it comes to like delegating different types of work to people on the team?
So it's interesting. I've actually talked to a number of people about this because as we're thinking about updating our product organization. So my co-founder runs product. So it's a bit of it. I think it's interesting based on who is on your founding team or even early team, or if you, the CEO, are the product person. Like I am a product person, but my co-founder is also a very good product person. I'd say I'm the big picture product person. She is the owning all the details and in the weeds product person. And that works out really, really well. But I am in a meeting that we started only this year. So it's actually pretty new, which is on Fridays where we have our head of design, head of product, and head of engineering basically report out to me what's going on. We do design, but we do design reviews. Like I'm commenting on the copy and the colors of things and things like that. Like I will get into the weeds on that. But I'm no longer involved in the product meetings every single week. And that only happens because of 2 things. One is because my co-founder is in all of those meetings. And then 2, and we talk all the time. So it's like my proxies there. And then 2, because our product is not just an engineering-based product. Our product is also we have a content product, as you know, and we also have we have a huge go-to-market part of our product, and then we have a huge operational part of our product, and then we have our engineering part of the product. And so I'm overseeing all of those. So just sitting within the details of just one of those product orgs doesn't really make sense for me. So I'm sitting at how do all these things come together?
How do you choose where to step back from though? Like how do you keep even outside of your co-founder, right? To other, I'm sure, leaders in different divisions in the team. How do you get to the level where you feel comfortable? Once again, even going back with your co-founder, how do you feel comfortable? Like I'm going to step back and like I used to be deep on everything, and we were doing all this together to moving off.
Part. I have no problem stepping back if I trust the person who's running it. Like I mean, full stop. I have no problem stepping back, and I don't know if that's a personal thing, but I think it's when you have great people, you just trust, and they're going to do it better than I am. And here's the thing: is like I don't need to know all the details, but I need to be able to ask about all the details. And my direct reports need to be able to give me an answer on that. So for example, I'm not double checking all of the, we had a new head of finance start. And I'm not going through line by line. I used to go through line by line and make sure that our financials were accurate, that I do the stiff test on everything. And I think that is super important and you do not want to mess that up. However, now I just go through it. He gives me the highlights. I ask questions and he knows the answers to them. And if there is something broken in the logic, if something doesn't pass my sniff test, then I dive in deeper. But if I know what I need to know, then we move on. And he's amazing. And so, yeah.
What's the right trade-off between diving deeper? Like sometimes people, there's these founders who like will go deep and like be almost annoying about their questions. Like they don't necessarily know what they're asking about, or they're going like so deep. Or is it like, look, you should be able to go, if you can go deeper than the person you're asking questions to, maybe they're not the right person or the right person. You don't like have a level of trust. Like where's your trade-off between that? Because you can undermine someone too. If you're like going so deep or asking questions that they're not prepared for, they might say you're not prepared. They're not prepared because like these are irrelevant to their job area.
So funny. I've never had this issue. Like either people work out or they don't. And the people who don't work out, they don't have the right answer. And it just doesn't work out and they're no longer here. And then there's people who work out and they're amazing and I trust them fully and they're going to do it all and they're going to get it right. And yeah, they're going to mess up sometimes, but it's not going to be at a rate that requires them to leave or me to do the job. If I'm stepping in to do the job, we don't have the right person.
Yeah. How quickly do you decide when you don't have the right person? Like how fast do you move there?
Honestly, just like everybody, too late. Like it is such a reality that, you know, you start to care about the human side of things, or you have other fires burning. Like this is the thing that I think people don't realize. At any given point, there are 15 to 50 fires going on at the company. I can only focus on number 1, number 2, and number 3. So if you're number 4, I'm ignoring you. And I have to let that fire burn. And sometimes the person who's not doing their job well is number 4, number 5, number 15. And it's just not the focus in the moment. And at the end of the day, you have to do what's good for the company. And, a lot of times, like, how do you protect the company and the people who are a part of the company? And so in every case, it's always been later than needed. Like we should have let that person go earlier, but it just wasn't the right time for whatever reason.
So what makes you then also, how do you prioritize properly? What are the most important questions in a company? Because founders can easily make that mistake of what to prioritize, and therefore they won't focus on the right thing. And next thing you know, you're 12 months later and you're out of cash.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize?
This totally. And so I think this is something that came up this week where my chief of staff wanted me to, I do like a big presentation every end of quarter, and it's this whole thing where we celebrate what we've done in the quarter, talk about what's coming up next quarter. And right now our company's just going through a bunch of change, and we're adding new products to the company. And I need to be like, I almost need to go do product market fit for some of the new stuff that we're building. And my brain actually needs to be more in the creative brain versus like the process operator brain. And so my chief of staff was really pushing me to do a end of first half of the year presentation this Friday. And I had to step back and tell her and our entire leadership team that, sure, this might be important for for people to have a sense of what's going on. But really what people need is for me to go spend time on developing and refining the next product that we're building. Like that is the only thing that's important right now that I can do right now. Everybody else has like things that they're doing that is super important, but I have to make that trade-off. And it's a really painful one because, by the way, I love doing these end of quarter presentations. I think they're really fun. People love them. But again, like that is not the most important thing right now. And it was hard because I think a lot of people see that as an easy win, not an easy win, but like a win. But that would have taken me an entire day. And I have to do the hard thing that is uncertain versus the thing that's right in front of me that feels like a win, but it's really running in place.
So how do you decide, like, that's a great example of things. Like, how do you tell your team then, I'm just not going to do this, even though it's something that you're used to, that's important? Like, I can make an argument on the other hand, be like, hey, look, it's really important for the whole team to be brought along with like where you are, what you're up to, keep them energized, excited, like no matter what, that's a really good thing to do. And so how do you think through that trade-off?
You don't think. And I think that like, that's what's uncomfortable for a lot of people. You don't logic your way out of that. You know in your gut what the right thing to do is. And I think our job as founders is to get really quiet and listen to all of these subconscious information that I'm getting on a day-to-day basis that is so much more than my conscious brain can understand. And it's to sit with that and say, what do I need to do? So every morning, I don't look at my phone. I go and I journal. I do essentially a couple pages in my journal. It's a Moleskine journal, so it's not super long. And it basically results in me writing the top 3 things I need to do that day. And that's before I look at any of the fires that are going on, right? It's just from my gut and from a clear brain, what do I need to do today? And those are the moments where gets back to the active thinking, active work and the passive work. Like we have to do the passive work. To me, that's part of my passive work where I'm thinking about what do I need to be doing. And so those are the moments that I decide. And actually my chief of staff had sent me the message Sunday night. And we talked about it. And then Monday morning, I thought about that. And I knew. And I know that that's hard for some people to understand, which is how do you just know? How do you, but that's the practice. Like you have to get good at knowing before you can understand it.
When you think through like doing that, so you're essentially saying like you're not beholden to your calendar anymore, right? You're saying like I don't care in a sense like what's fully on my calendar as much saying like
yeah,
but something completely right. 'Cause you're not looking at what's up for that day per se. You're like, look, just they're at the top of my day. These are my number one priorities and things that I'm going to try to get done. And how good are you then at tracking? Like I actually achieved like for your 3 things this morning. Are you going to look at that at the end of the day and be like, oh, I actually got those done, irrespective of the fact that you've been, I know, but like back to back to back all day.
Yeah.
And who knows how many more meetings you still have to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to get way better at that. That is like, I need to get way better at looking at it because as soon as I look at it, I'm reminded of my most important thing. But more often than not, even just writing it down in the beginning of the day, I at least accomplish 2 out of the 3 almost every day. And it's imprinted in me if I write it down. And that's why writing down is so much more important than thinking it.
Yeah, because it imprinted and reminds you, I assume, of that on a regular basis. Yeah. When you think through like one team, like being a founder, process, all those other things, I know you say you don't like to have a lot of process. Are there things you do think about like other big companies, OKRs, things like that, where you try to put something in place for the rest of the team at least to have some sort of idea? Like even to your example, like you're not going to do an end of the year review or end of the quarter or halfway through the year review at the end of this week. Does the team still know what they should be trying to achieve in Q3 or through the end of the year? Like, does any of that change or do you need to update that? Like, how does that, or you're like, hey, look, made plans at the beginning of the year and we're still on track.
Yeah. So that's the thing is, I'm laughing at OKR because somehow the narrative, like the team thinks I hate OKRs. I'm like, I don't hate OKRs. I think that goals should be simple. Like, I don't hate OKRs at all. But for some reason, I've been labeled the she hates OKRs person. Anyway, and so I am a big believer in setting like in chunking time. So thinking about what cadence can we operate on? What is our current operating cadence? And so when we started the company, it was on a day-to-day basis, pre-product market fit. What did we do yesterday? Okay, what are we going to do today? Then when we hit product market fit, we did it on a weekly cadence. So it was, okay, here's all the feedback we got last week. Sundays we'd come together. What do we want to build this week? Let's go build it. Then and then when we started to get around like 20-ish people, we experimented with monthly. Okay, here's what we do. Here's what we're doing this month. And then probably around 50 people, we ended up doing quarterly cadence. And that lasted for a good 2 years or so. And then the market just shifted. Like we tried to do, quarterly and annual goals this year, and it hasn't actually been the right cadence for us. And I think here's the important thing. It's not that the cadence just gets longer and longer. It can get shorter. It can come back to being shorter. And right now, we're in a period of change. Like the market's changed, our products changed, we're building new products. Like there's a lot of stuff that's going on. And so we're actually just operating on a week to week and a month to month basis now. And to be honest, I like it way better, way, way, way better. And I think to operate on faster cadences as much as possible is actually the biggest benefit because people just end up doing a lot more and you get to, you can respond to your customers faster when you operate on a shorter cadence.
So essentially what you're saying is like the feedback loop is much faster. And so you're able to get that information. How do you imbue, especially at a company of 100 plus people, how do you imbue that mentality across the company to make sure like that feedback loop is happening and people are moving as fast as you want them to? Because you probably as a founder will always be either willing or able to move faster than anyone else. And does that lead to perpetual disappointment with everyone else? Or how do you make sure like the team is still hitting the metrics when you are not in every meeting, you're not part of everything everyone's doing, but still moving as fast as you want them to achieve the overall goals of the company?
I don't know is the answer. Like I'm a big believer in hire great people, give them their general direction and goals, and they'll get it done. And at the end of the day, most problems are people problems. Like it's just, I have never been able to solve a people problem with process. And what I mean by that is the right person almost doesn't need goals, and the wrong person will not be helped by goals.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of, at this stage, by the way, like I think that, let's say we're 200, 500 people, like things change and be like at every, at every maybe like increment, there is like, going from 1 to 2, like 2 people to 10 people to 25 people to 50 people to 100 to 200 to 500, like to 1,000. Like those are all just marks, and they're very different companies. And so I think that with where we are today, it is still a very people-driven business versus a process-driven business. And I think it's important to know which one you're in.
So speaking of the people side of things, have you had to deal with, or how have you dealt with having like top people, right? So the people who are great when you were 10 people, probably many of them are not, they might still be great, but
Yeah.
not perfect for that role when you're 100
Yep.
people. How have you dealt with those transitions?
Oh my God, it's so tough because these people become family, like you're so close to them. And I think that the mindset is just remembering that whatever I believe is the right thing for the company and for them is the thing I have to do. Like I have to do the right thing. There's no other way. And the right thing is generally not acquiescing to people's immediate and temporal needs, right? Like the need to feel constantly important is not the right thing for the company, or the need to feel like I still have the same power and oversight that I did at 10 people. Like that is not the right decision. The right decision is what's going to be the good for everybody's long-term value in this company. And I just have to put myself in that mindset.
And how often then does it lead to like the people leaving the company or sticking around, but like in maybe less of a title, like they maybe don't have that title anymore, or maybe I'm actually curious what you guys do on titles in general, but like how you manage that? Like they stay, do they leave? What happens?
As in person, have had people leave, have had people stay. Like it's totally depends on the person. But if people end up leaving, it's because we had a conversation about what was needed and what they wanted to do and were able to do. And I'll say, like, it's never fun when somebody leaves. Like there's not a good parting ways, even if in the best of cases, it's always bittersweet and sad and just all the things. So yeah.
And related to that, going back to your recruiting as well, are there certain roles where you're in your mind like, hey, I need to upgrade this role? I need to think deeply about like, I need to do better here. I need to find someone better.
Oh,
how do you go about recruiting for that and finding the people? Or is that just like an ongoing process? You're meeting a million people, you're talking to a million founders, investors, VCs, whomever, and like have a list?
No, I try to, like, I've actually found that opportunistic stuff, like keep 10% of life for opportunistic stuff when you post product market fit. Pre-product market fit, keep 90% of life for opportunistic and 10% for just the problem in front of you. After you have product market fit, swap that. 90% should just be the number one thing that's important right now. 10% should be opportunity, like, magic that happens because you met somebody. You should absolutely have that and do not lose that. But 90% of it is just, I've never found somebody when it's, oh, maybe I'll need an engineering lead one day. Like, let me just meet this person who, like, I will always push those calls off and say, I'd love to connect down the line. We're not looking for this role right now. Tag it in my inbox, move on.
Yeah. Interesting. And then when you do need to find someone, how deeply do you hand that off to your head of recruiting? Be like, hey, look, we need to find someone for this role. I'm going to give me the people, or you're going to go deep in there, at least for.
No, I go super deep. I go super, super deep. So I'm big on calibrating for greatness. That is the most important part of recruiting. If I don't know what an A+ human in the role should look like, and if I don't know it so deeply that when I'm presented with that person, I can sense it with all of my senses, I shouldn't be hiring for that role.
So I think the
calibrating. So the first thing I do is I go find people who are great. And like for head of engineering, I asked, we have one investor who is deep in the engineering world. And so I asked him, but I didn't ask him for, hey, send me great, CTOs or VP engineering. I said, hey, I want somebody who does this, this, and this. And the things that I actually wanted have been at a company with a really, really high bar for engineering culture, and then who then left and went to a startup and scaled it from an engineering perspective, and also have a good product mindset. Like I gave specific criteria. So then I ended up talking to people. The other thing is I asked a bunch of people for recommendations, and then I basically triangulated their recommendations. And when people mentioned the same person over and over again, I went and talked to that person. And so I probably talked to 30 different people before I felt calibrated. And the way you're calibrated is if you're taking these conversations and you're not learning anything new.
Yeah.
If you're still learning, keep taking calls.
It's a great way to metric it. Are you writing all this down then too? You're like, okay, here's my, let's call it marketing role or something. Like, here's my marketing role, top marketing person. Here's all the notes I've taken from all the 30 meetings I've had, and like the synthesis of that as well. Is that like a writing down, or it's just like in your
I do write it down. Yeah, but I think of myself as I'm an AI model. I'm a large language model, and I just like need to train myself. That's literally how I think about it.
Yeah. And that's just using your network then in many cases, or just like scoping through LinkedIn. Who do I know? Who leads this next person?
Yep. And then I'll ask that person. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, then I'll ask that person, who are the people who you recommend the most, who you respect the most, who you learn from the most.
Yeah. And then you go after them and try to hire them.
Yeah.
So going back to actually, I'm going to kind of skip off the company stuff for a second and go back to one of the questions I usually ask right at the very beginning. We skip right ahead of this one, but how do you define entrepreneurial excellence? Like, what does that look like to you? If you can think through, like, what is the definition of that, of excellence? What is a great entrepreneur or excellent entrepreneur?
I've never thought about this, so this is my gut reaction.
Great.
But so I think it is a combination of two things. It is being the absolute best you can be. So like never settling for anything less than what you're capable of. It is consistently being better every single day. Like it's like the rate of change is super, super high. And then it's just like this intensity. You have to just drive through. You have to be a force. You have to just keep going no matter what and have that confidence. And then maybe the last piece of it is you have to be working on something important.
Yeah.
Like it's all of that.
Although I assume most founders believe what they're working on is important, almost irrespective. Like hopefully they have that belief that they're
not true.
Really? Tell me more.
Would be shocked. I think that this really shocked me, but I've found so many people who just want to be founders. I'm like, what? Why would anyone want this? This is horrible.
I mean, it was sexy. There was like a whole period of time where like everybody who come from a top school was like, instead of being a consultant or banker, they're like, I'm going to go
be a founder
because it was the sexy. I can go raise millions of dollars and tell my friends that I founded a company. So I agree that I went through that period, but you still see that?
Oh, definitely. Like being a founder is like this sexy thing, and it's really not. If you look at my daily life, it's really not. You know, people joke about their biological age as being, my biological age is like 21. I'm like, my biological age is, 517. Like I'm so old because of this stress.
Yep. And so you think the founders, like the great ones though, or the excellent ones, are the ones who like really are deep in it and focus on a problem they truly believe is a big one and has like a chance of leading to big outcomes. Like that leads to the next question. Like, what is success? What does success for a great entrepreneur look like? Or how do you define success?
I'll talk about success in a second, but I think that this concept of a great entrepreneur needs to be working on a big problem. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think about it as there are so many reasons to quit. And at the end of the day, the people who change the world because of what they've built are just the ones who didn't quit. And to not quit on something, you have to really believe in it. You get burned at the stake so many times through this journey. Like you get personally attacked. It's not pretty. And I think that if you achieve any moderate level of notoriety, you just want to run and hide because the stuff that comes your way is really mean. And to keep going through it all, you need to have something driving you. And I think at the end of the day, it is not the people value me or people like me. It's not that at all. It is what I'm working on is what I'm supposed to be working on. And there is absolutely no way that anything anybody does or says can deter me. And you got to have that. And so that's why I think the important problem is part of entrepreneurial excellence.
How did you get there for yourself, right? As we determined, like this wasn't something you necessarily were like in the space to do. Sure, you had like personal health problems. You like realized this was a problem that needed to be solved, but it wasn't like you came from this like throughout life. You're like, this is my journey was to go help build something like Rupa Health. How did it become something? Okay, so explain.
Yeah, it was. I looked around and I realized this is where I spend all of my time. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm reading for fun. This is what I'm obsessing about. This is what I'm helping my friends with. I have become the go-to person on people's health. Like my whole life has been about, I love making people happy. And I know that sounds silly, but I love like joy in life. And I realize if we don't, health is the most important determining factor of joy and human aliveness. And that's what my life has always been about. Like even as a little kid, I was always making stuff and making presents for people. Like I just loved bringing joy out of people. And to me, like my joy was basically squashed in college when I got really sick and I realized that my health was connected to my emotional state, and that was a huge unlock for me. Then I realized, how different would the world be if we were all operating at 100% of what we're biologically able to operate at? And so for me, that's what this was about. And it was a lifelong journey. And if you look at my background, it doesn't really make sense on paper, but it was always there. And I mean, in college, I wrote down on a napkin, I was like, wow, I'm going to build a company that's going to change the standard of living, like what it means to be truly alive for every person on the planet. Like that was my goal. And so it's always been there. I came out to California to figure out how to build products in health and tech. And it's just been this like crazy journey. And it was really hard for many years when people didn't understand it. And then it got a lot more fun when people started to get it and when society started to catch up. But it is still incredibly and tremendously like difficult. And I think that for anybody who's considering starting a company, be ready for the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual toll it takes. And you got to have your why.
Yeah, you definitely have your why. Agreed. Are there other things? So like speaking of the health stuff, and then I would come back to a different question, but since you brought up this great topic, and I'm always curious in it, because I think about this a lot myself too, as I've gotten frankly more mature as a founder as well. Like I totally agree. Like I try every day, how can I show up at my very, very best and make the most of this single day and be as good as I possibly can be? And when I haven't optimized that properly, it actually really bothers me because like something went wrong and I'm not quite, my okay is probably better than like 98% of most people, I think, but it's still not 100%. I want to do better. What are things, given that you're in the health space, especially, and obviously full disclosure, not health advice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but like, are there certain things beyond journaling and taking off every Friday night and Saturday? Are there certain things you do think about for your health that you're like, I need to make sure these are really right, or things you take, supplements you take, tests you make sure you take to like, be like I'm performing physically and then mentally, of course, as well at my very, very best?
So for the last 8 years, 8 years, I have been tracking like 62 different things.
Wow.
And
or a spreadsheet of your, like a spreadsheet you have, or like what?
It's an app. I don't know where I found it, but like it's an app. It's called Way of Life. And I heard it on Tim Ferriss and someone podcast. Like I'll remember it at some point. But anyway, I heard it in 2016 January, like right after New Year's, and I downloaded the app. I remember where I was at the gym, and I started tracking stuff. And now I have like 8 years of data. And one of the things that I've tracked is, did I have a good day? Just as simple as it's just, it's just, did I have a good day? Yes or no? And I remember year 3 of the company. I was on a flight back to visit my parents in Texas. And I looked at it and I recognized, I saw the trends. You can see trends. And had a good day, had been pretty stable. And then as soon as I started the company, it had been decreasing. And I realized my happiness had been going down on a day-to-day basis. Even though I hadn't realized it, but I didn't realize it until I saw it in that moment. And it hit me. And I said, this is my number one goal. I have to bring up my baseline happiness. Otherwise, I'm going to not survive.
You're going to burn out, fail. The company will fail.
Yeah,
probably.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. And at that point, so I made a whole list of what are all the things that I need to do to improve my happiness. And the number one thing was sleep. And it was just, I need that baseline sleep and no compromises. And for me, that is my body loves going to bed at 9 and waking up at 4. Like that is just my body. I love it. And I'm so happy in the mornings. And so I just started doing that. And now ever since then, like I don't ever compromise on that. Like I go to sleep. I'm never working at midnight. I'm often working at 4 a.m., but I'm never working at midnight. I'm asleep.
Does that mean you even like leave? Will you leave like an event? Because like dinners don't even start sometimes to like 7:30 p.m. And like,
I either don't go or I walk out early.
I gotta go.
Yeah. I try to be home by 8:30, and then I wind down my night, and then I go to bed. Yeah, and sometimes it'll be later, but I rarely go to bed after midnight. Rarely, very rarely. And it's just as what works for me. And that one thing, along with hydration, 100 ounces of water a day, changed my life. Totally changed my life.
So sleep for you is the biggest one, and then
biggest one. And I think finding out that keystone thing for you is the most important.
So okay. Next question then along those lines, like when you think through and going back to actually the entrepreneurial excellence, are there other founders that you think are like shout out to people where you're like, you've done it great. Either ones you know personally or others just like publicly where you're like, they are excellent entrepreneurs. They figured this out and aced it, and I want to emulate what they're doing.
Man, I've always found this question hard, which is who do you look up to? Who are these other people? Who are your idols? And I've just never had anybody. And I think it's a bit of there are so many people I admire for so many pieces of who they are. I'm constantly reading biographies and I get so much inspiration from them. Like one of the biggest things for my mental health is I'm always reading a book. I'm always reading a biography. I'm always like, I essentially have a crew of people who are like me, right? Because I'm reading about them. They don't know, I'm reading about Sam Walton and Elon, just all these people, right, who have never met. Many of them are dead, and they feel like my best friends because I'm knowing their stories. And so I think there's a bit of, everybody. I don't think there's any one person in particular. I think the biggest thing I've learned is this journey is yours and yours alone, and you have to figure out what works for you and do that. But I think the people who I admire the most are the ones who just have this gusto. They are the most themselves, and they don't care to fit in, and they just do what they think is right. And I love that about them. There are so many people who I think are just amazing, and they're brilliant. And like my friend Celine, who has a company called Loyal, she's amazing, and we just gravitated towards each other when we were both like seed companies in first round, and she just like says it as it is and is insanely smart and is building this like massive company. And the people who dream really big and who are unafraid to share that with the world, like I have so much respect for those people who do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think I did something similar. Like I for myself did something similar like that this past week, where I went to actually a conference for kind of off track from what Levy itself does, my own company, but also a lot of founders doing really cool, interesting, different things. I'm like, I just wanted different like mental mind space and being around some of these people, just learning different things. But I don't care what other people think either. I'm just like, it doesn't matter. How do you manage, related to some of that stuff? Like, how do you manage the kind of the work-life balance, work-life equilibrium? How do you think through that part, right? So like, it sounds like for you, it's like, hey, you take off like a day and a half-ish, but most of it's not your friend time. Like, how do you do that? Or is it just like, it's basically like, essentially everything's work. It's just depending whether it's active work or passive work, basically.
Yeah, everything's work. It's just active work or passive work. And I think of it as like either I'm recharging or I'm either using my fuel or I'm recharging my fuel. And everything's just this one life. Like I've always been a big believer in this concept of one life. And that's actually what I want from our team too, where we are not, we don't have work selves and then outside of work selves. Like that, this is not the company for you if that's what you're looking for. We kind of just like bring it all. Like I know the spouses of so many of my teammates. I know, who they are and their pets' names and all of that stuff. And I think that is like, we're a company for humans and about humanity, and that's what we do. And so for me, I've never believed in work-life balance. Like the whole concept of that just like irks me, because if I have no balance and I don't want to have any balance. And I think that like I know that is different for different people at different stages of their life, but no matter what, I'm a pretty intense person and I'm a pretty extreme person. And the number of people who've told me that, it's just, I think that greatness happens at the extremes. And I think I don't know, I think a life well lived is one where you see what you're capable of, and you push yourself to the extreme to get there.
I agree. I mean, you only have one life to live, and your time is the most precious resource. So being able to find a way to optimize for that and test yourself against it is one of the, I think great things you do.
Totally. And so I don't believe in work-life balance, but I really, really believe in active work, passive work, recharge, reset, like refuel, rejuvenate. I really believe in that. So every quarter I do a solo think trip where I take Thursday through Sunday and I go to the woods and I get in a cat Airbnb and I just don't talk to anyone and I just read 5 books nonstop. And I come back and that's the most refreshed I ever am. And it's the best thing ever.
Yeah, that's actually awesome. And then how much of that do you like let apply to like your direct day to day, or do you like, because like I read all these books too, and I do ever listen. I don't know if you listen to like the Founders podcast, because they're all about like biographies of people and stuff. So it's great too. It's very easy to have all these ideas and like, I want to go apply this to my company right now, versus saying like, I'm gonna like let it sit in mold.
Yeah, I've gotten better at that. I think so. I never really had a job before Rupa. Like, this is my first real job. Rupa is the biggest company I've ever worked for. I'm learning everything for the first time. I think the number one skill I have, and maybe the only skill I have, is that I learn really quickly and that I can figure things out. And I, in the early days, I had a lot more confidence in other people and a lot less confidence in myself when it came to running the company. And so I'd listen to these books and podcasts and I'd try to implement them right away. And actually, I think I needed to do that a little bit to learn, a little bit of cause and effect. What happens if you try this? What happens if you Now, I think I've earned enough wisdom to have a better sense of how things will play out and whether they're the right thing for our company. So, for example, I think an earlier version of me would have said, yep, we need to do this half-year presentation. I'm going to take the next 2 days and build this out. It's going to be great. And it would have gone great. Today's version of me knows that the most important thing for the company is to use that time to work on our next product.
Yeah. And just say, I'm confident with that and I'm cool with that. Are there people that you get advice from when you think through, how do I build a company to go from 100 now to 200? How do it double? How do I handle that? Or help you see the future? Or is it reading books and thinking through what that looks like?
Yeah. I never think about having a company that goes from 100 to 200. I only think about how do we hire the next engineer? It's everything is iterative. And it comes back to what is the problem that I'm trying to solve today? What is the number one thing I need to solve today, in this moment, in this hour, in this day? What is it? What am I trying to do? I think this whole concept of being present and having a singular focus on things is super, super critical. And so I don't have a single person that I ask for advice. I have tons of people I reach out to based on the problem that I'm working through.
Okay. What about, you must have a board, right? Do you have to report to them on a regular basis and hey, this is what's happening, and give them the updates? Even you're I have all these problems and fires I'm trying to fight today. I don't really want to sit here and give you a whole board presentation, but how do you balance that? Because you also need your board for different things.
I don't. Yeah. So I don't actually have to report out to my board. I want to, which is the greatest feeling ever, which is I have this team who will help me solve problems. So we actually have switched our board meetings from readouts to problem solving. So I actually just bring the biggest problems. I write a pre-read on here's how to think about this, and then we talk about them. And they're very helpful.
That's great. That's smart. Were they cool with that change? I mean, is that something they hadn't seen before? I'm sure you have amazing people under.
No, they asked for it.
Really? So they pushed you in that direction?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they asked for it, and I simultaneously heard it somewhere else, and so we all came together and we said, "Oh, we should be doing this," and it just worked out. It's very collaborative.
That's amazing. Speaking through some of the last sort of questions I like to ask people, what are if you have to think through the key one piece of advice that you would give to every single founder, and you're this is the thing you need to absolutely do to achieve excellence. How would you define that one thing?
I was going to say, don't quit. I think that is truly the most important thing. Don't give up. Life comes in waves, and there is a season for everything. Sometimes it's going to be really tough. Sometimes it's going to be really great. And by the way, I think quit is an important concept to take very personally. Quitting looks different for different people, but I say it in what I mean when I say don't quit is I don't mean don't shut down your company. What I mean is don't kill that spirit inside of yourself that wants to keep building and wants to keep creating. And that is the most important thing. Don't let that pilot light go out. And maybe it doesn't even look like the current business that you have. Maybe it looks like something totally different. But don't let that builder energy. I've seen too many people either do something they don't like for way too long and then get incredibly burnt out and not want to keep going in life, not even just in the thing they're doing. Or, people who just don't know when to pivot or don't know when to switch things up. And or people who maybe even just stop doing what they're doing too soon. And I just say, I think the excellence in life, not even just entrepreneurship, but just in life, is about recognizing that life has a bigger plan for us, and the ups, there wouldn't be the ups if it weren't for the downs, and you got to figure out a way through. And that's the journey, right? When you zoom back, we are I'm sitting on this couch in this room in San Francisco, in this country, on this planet, in this solar system, in this galaxy, right? If you just think about how tiny we are, the whole point of this is just to have fun and see how far we can go. And I think we forget that because we make it so this thing has to happen and I have to control it. But what happens if we just let go and enjoy everything that comes our way, whether we believe we like it or not? I think it's a bit of the Chinese proverb of the the man with the horse and the horse with the broken leg, and his neighbors come and they say, oh, that's so unfortunate. And he says, oh, maybe not. And then it's a whole parable about, we don't know if this thing in front of us is good or bad. We just know that it is, and let's keep going.
Yeah, I don't actually have any more. I have other questions, but I almost don't want to add anything because that was such a great final answer. The one thing I would say is, have you read the book, The Surrender Experiment?
Yeah, well, funny. Okay, so this book, this whole concept of surrender has been, it's so funny. Like me, even 2 years ago, would have been allergic to the concept of surrender, but it has come up in so many ways over the last month for me. And this book came up last week, and I started reading it. And it's funny that you're saying this now, but this has been like a whole thing. And his other books too, have been life-changing in other ways. But yeah, it's all about that.
It is. I'm reading it right now too. So it's weird how the universe all works, where it's like, this is something really interesting and this is the idea, but it really is like, let the universe take its way it is, accept it for what it is, and then like push through to the next step. Like take that for what it means and see where it leads you, and don't be scared of the direction.
And the story's never over.
The story's never over. Good shit will happen. So like, how can everyone find you? If they want to get in touch, how do they find you? Where do they find you? How do they learn more? How do they sign up for Rupa? All that good stuff.
I love it. So a great way to never get a response is to email me.
Is that because you don't check the email? Like, what's the secret?
Yeah. Like I just get so many spam emails that I can't tell what's real, what's not. And I tend to ignore it unless it's somebody I know and it's a whole thing. An even better way to get a response in like 10 years is LinkedIn. So like, don't do that either. Twitter is way better. Yeah, honestly, probably Twitter. That's the easiest way to reach me, to engage with me, all of that. And for Rupa, we are really only for healthcare practitioners right now, but you can go sign up if you're a doctor or a healthcare practitioner at rupahealth.com. And yeah, find me in San Francisco.
That is amazing. And I do think there's an argument that a lot of people should move to San Francisco if you're building a startup. At least I hear from a lot of people that be around people like you that will inspire you to push yourself to the next level. Well,
be around the best in the world.
It literally is one of the best quotes and best things I ever learned was early before I even moved to the Bay Area. So I've been here 14 years now. I was lucky enough to be introduced, getting introductions from great people, to a founder of a Sequoia-backed company who was based in DC, which is pretty rare. This was like 16 years ago. And I said, like, he's like, oh, you want to be in tech? I was like, yeah. Like, it's what I've always wanted to do. I want to be in this space, like just building the future. He said, well, look, here's my story for you. And remember, he's based in DC. He's a Sequoia-backed company and founder and CEO. Said, if you want to be in politics, be in DC. If you want to be in finance, go to New York. If you want to do like media, go to LA. If you want to be in tech, go to the Bay Area. Like, just go do that and be around those people to push you, inspire you. Yes, maybe your chance of failure in a sense will be higher, but the network you build and the knowledge you learn can't be replicated otherwise without that. And it's that push and pull that enables you to grow. So I totally agree. So go, everyone can find you. Watch out on Saturdays. You're sitting in your coffee shop. Don't bother you when you're journaling. But Tara, thank you so much for your time. Once again, it is such a precious thing that we all have. So thank you for sharing some of it with me in the audience. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
My pleasure.
Good to chat with you, Adam.